You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your team's home base. Collaborate within a shared PDF space. You've got your docs, your plans, your specs, and then invite the crew to build what's next. They talk up the teamwork. Here's an updated render. They think that this design could be a contender. And when somebody wonders what's the next step, AI helps you finish the rest. Bolts are tight, now your plan's refined. Run a smoother business when you're all aligned. Do that with Acrobat. Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-Acrobat.
Grown-ups, if there's a child in your life who is interested in, curious about, or fascinated by people and places from history, then my podcast, The Past and the Curious, might just be a hit in your home. From the invention of microscopes to world-traveling dogs to fashions of the 1890s, gold rush ghost towns, and audiences going wild for walking competitions, we've got a little bit of it all. Hosted by children's author and museum educator Mick Sullivan, that's me, the show is fun, funny, engaging, honest, and beloved by kids and parents alike. Find The Past and the Curious at all the usual podcast places.
This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
Join our Patreon for extra episodes, interviews, extra content, and to help support the podcast and help us continue to do the work we do.
Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl to learn more. They're attempting to Targaryen. Everyone back up. I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl. So, are you so ready for this nonsense?
I could never be ready for this episode. This is one of the ones where I was like, I know nothing about and I'm not that interested. And Jenny pulled out all the stops to make me a convert.
Just you wait, Jen. You're going to join the cult of Mausolus in a minute, scamming people out of their hair. Today, we are gathered here to talk about a wonder that was built for a man who was once extremely powerful, very well known, famous within his own small circle of friends, I suppose.
He was a big shark in that small pond.
You know, I think he really was. But today, he's known primarily for the grandness of his tomb, a tomb commissioned not by him, but by his wife and sister. A tomb so great that much like the Pharos' name has been used in some languages to mean all lighthouses, his name in English now means all tombs, or at least all the above-ground fancy tombs. Who was Mausolus? What made his tomb so great, and why did we name it after him and not his wife? In this episode, we're going to answer all the questions that can be answered. Let's dive in.
We didn't name it after his wife because patriarchy. Moving on.
Yeah, easy answer to that question.
Just had to answer that one in case any of you were thinking it wouldn't be that. It is that.
There is not a better answer, unfortunately, and I am going to pause before we move on, and I just want to talk briefly about my history with the word mausoleum. Jen knows what I'm going to say because I've already told her this. When I was a kid, I read a lot of books, and I read above my grade level a lot, and so I would encounter a lot of words that I just didn't hear around me very much, and I made up in my own head how to pronounce them, and would just sometimes pop out with these words that were not how you say it, so nobody knew what I was talking about, and my mom would make relentless fun of me for this, and not in a bad way, you know, my mom was very supportive, but she would always be like, Jenny, you said papyrus. And it's papyrus. Like this, she just delighted in this, that I would just pronounce things weird. And one of the words that I would pronounce wrong was mausoleum. And the way that I said it was mausoleum.
Like linoleum.
Yeah, exactly.
As I was saying to Jenny, after spending 16 years in the UK, my accent, as she knows from listening to the podcast, is all over the place. And because we recently found out like 4 years ago that I'm dyslexic, it makes a lot of sense why I can never get the sounds or the letters right. I'm like, Jenny, when I was a kid, I would just mispronounce everything and wait and hope someone said it and I didn't have to say the word first because who knew what was going to come out of my mouth? Not even me.
I find it deeply ironic that I now have a podcast with the one person I know who is worse at pronouncing words than me. We are two extremely tragic people when it comes to pronouncing words in our own language, let alone anyone else's language, and we have a podcast.
We do.
But every single time, to this day, I know it's mausoleum. In my head, like intellectually, I'm aware that it is mausoleum, but every time I see this word, my brain goes mausoleum. That's what it looks like. That's what it's always going to look like. I can't help it. I'm going to do my best to say mausoleum in this episode, but if I occasionally say mausoleum, I'm not going to go back and edit it. You're just going to have to accept it.
It happens to the best of us, and Jenny.
And me, unfortunately. Yes.
So the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus was built between 353 and 350 BC in the city of Halicarnassus, the capital of Caria, an ancient nation located in what's now southwestern Turkey on the southeastern coast of the Aegean Sea. Herodotus, incidentally, was born in Halicarnassus. His parents were Greek and Carian. The Carians were said to be descended from Minoan traders. The Persian Achaemenid Empire took over Caria in 545 BC, and Herodotus' family, who did not welcome the Persian overlords, had to flee to Samos. So Caria became a satrapy, sort of like a province of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and it stayed that way for a long time. When Mausolus came to power 168 years later, in 377 BC, it was still a satrapy of Persia, so Mausolus was technically just a glorified governor.
Mausolus' dad was a man named Hecatomnus. Anyway, so Hecatomnus or Hecatomnos, I'm not sure, made some modest expansions to the kingdom, taking over a few other local districts. This must have given Mausolus an appetite for expansion and rule, because after his dad died and Mausolus took over in 377 BC, he started changing things up. First, he moved Caria's capital city from Mylasa to Halicarnassus, a bustling coastal city with more port access and more potential to connect with the outside world. Mausolus then extended his territory to the southwest, in particular conquering Lycia, an area on the southwestern coast of Anatolia which was known for its many impressive monumental tombs. Most notable were the tombs of Xanthos, which incorporated elements from Greece, India, and Persia, as well as design elements unique to Lycia.
Mausolus opened his country up to the world and incorporated lots of different influences in building his city. By some accounts, he transformed Caria from a sleepy backwater to a place well connected with and important to the Hellenic world. And while he did this, he stayed mostly tight with his Persian overlords. He was said to have participated, to some extent, in the revolt of the satraps, a revolt of governors against their Persian overlords in the 360s BC. But when he saw that the revolt was going to fail, he quickly aligned himself with the Persians again. So, for his whole rule in Caria, Mausolus was technically just a glorified governor of a Persian satrapy. But in inscriptions and other ancient texts, he's often referred to as a king, a strong hint at exactly how powerful he was in his own region, and how much latitude the Persians let him have.
Mausolus does not have a good reputation in the ancient sources. His name seems to serve as a kind of stereotypical tyrant boogeyman, like, make sure to maintain your democracy or Mausolus will get you. And it's a little close to home these days as an American. But many of the stories that get specific about what he did that was so bad involve wacky scams to get his subjects to overpay their taxes. I love this so much.
This is because Jenny's secret other passion, well, one of her other passions, is like scam artists.
I love scam artists so much. I love scams. I love schemes. I love cons.
When we both saw The Tinder Swindler and Inventing Anna, we were like, Jenny was like, I am here for these scams. And now when I find them, I try to point them out to Jenny like, ooh, new documentary about a scammer.
Well, Mausolus was a total scam boy. According to Polyanus, whose name means many anuses.
It definitely doesn't mean that, but I love it.
And Aristotle, Mausolus was a huge Tinder swindler scam boy. How great is this? Okay, so apparently this one time, he was desperate to raise money to pay the heavy taxes levied by Artaxerxes II Memnon, the Persian ruler. So Mausolus lied to the citizens of Mylasa, which was the former capital city, telling them that Artaxerxes was going to attack their city any minute now, whipping up their fears and getting them to pay him fat stacks of cash so he could build walls for their defense.
Once the city leaders had paid up, Mausolus claimed that the omens were bad, Whoops, he couldn't build those walls after all. The omens didn't, however, stop him from keeping their money, and as you can tell, it sucks to be them. Oh, and Artaxerxes never did attack their city, because he was never planning an attack in the first place. Scam.
Scammity, scam face, scam boy.
According to Aristotle, Mausolus also had this lieutenant governor, Condulus, who had all kinds of scams running to extract money from the populace. There are several, but one of his wackiest scams involved hair, which is wild, and I just have to pause for a minute there.
This is one of my favorite scams. It's a classic. A classic.
It is not. Like, I've never heard of this scam before, but it's wild. I mean, I guess it's classic because it is from classical times, but anyway. So Condulus noticed that the Lycians, Mausolus' recent conquest, liked to wear their hair long. It was their fashion. It was their style. Condulus was taking notes and was like, how can we exploit that?
Condulus announced to the Lycians that Artaxerxes II, who was always like, the mythical bad guy in these scams, had commanded him to send hair to make wigs for his horses. And thus, Mausolus had ordered all the Lycians to shave their heads because everyone knew that the Lycians had the longest, thickest, most well-conditioned hair around. And Mausolus was absolutely in on this. Of course, the Lycians did not want to do this, but luckily there was an option B. Just pay Condulus instead, and he'd go buy hair from the Greeks. Yeah, the Greeks. A lot of Lycians opted to do this, and Condulus and Mausolus raked it in. And I just want to pause and say that, I really do love that, they're always blaming Artaxerxes for this. Artaxerxes is just going to do a thing. You guys better pay us. It's just so scammy.
He's so their boogeyman, and he was, totally not interested in any of this shit.
No, Artaxerxes had no idea any of this was going on, unless he was also in on it, but I kind of don't think he was, because I kind of think he was way wealthier than these two scam boys.
Yeah.
I think he didn't have to run these scams. He had bigger scams to run, okay? Anyway, of course, these are stories from outside the Carian culture from Greek sources. Writing from inside Caria tells a slightly different story of Mausolus taking action against his subjects. For instance, a series of inscriptions found in the cities of Mylasa and another Carian city of Iassos tell a story of Mausolus banishing aristocrats who conspired against him.
There were apparently 2 assassination attempts, which were thwarted. And a group of brothers secretly plotted to desecrate a statue of Mausolus' dad, Hecatomnus. I will say it like Mr. Tumnus. I might just call him Mr. Tumnus. Mausolus' dad, Mr. Tumnus. The city of Iassos apparently granted the brothers proxenate, which is kind of like the status of visiting dignitaries, even as they were banished, possibly as a fuck you to Mausolus, giving us a hint there was perhaps some tension between Mausolus' HQ and his surrounding cities. Maybe there was a grain of truth in these Greek tales. Maybe the hair scam was a thing. But we don't know for sure that anything that was going on was quite this scammy. I just want to pretend maybe it was.
I will say that governors in the ancient world were known for exploiting their populaces and charging lots of taxes and doing whatever they had to get loads of money and potentially raise armies there. If you just look at how the ancient Roman governors of provinces behaved before that was cracked down on in various ways, they had some checks on their power. For example, when they left their governorships, because these were limited time positions, and came back to Rome, they could be prosecuted by these public defenders making a name for themselves, like, for example, the young Julius Caesar. It was pretty rare that these governors did really face justice, and this was this was not ancient Rome. This was a different society where I'm sure there was a lot less justice, a lot less accountability, unless it was coming from the top. It was coming from Artaxerxes, and I don't think Artaxerxes particularly cared as long as there was no upheaval and unrest there. And he was getting his taxes on time. I don't think he particularly cared what they were up to over there. He's like, I don't know, just levy these taxes. I don't care how you do it. So potentially if the taxes were high, or maybe just Mausolus was greedy, he could have been strong-arming people into paying taxes, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throughout history, royals across the world were notorious for incest. They married their own relatives in order to consolidate power and keep their blood blue. But they were oblivious to the havoc all this inbreeding was having on the health of their offspring. From Egyptian pharaohs marrying their own sisters to the Habsburgs' notoriously oversized lower jaws. I explore the most shocking incestuous relationships and tragically inbred individuals in royal history. And that's just episode 1. On the History Tea Time podcast, I profile remarkable queens and LGBTQ+ royals, explore royal family trees, and delve into women's medical history and other fascinating topics. I'm Lindsay Holiday, and I'm spilling the tea on history. Join me every Tuesday for new episodes of the History Tea Time podcast, wherever fine podcasts are enjoyed.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
Hello everyone, Takuya here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
So, let's talk about Mausolus's wife, shall we? So, Mausolus married his sister, Artemisia II. Like the Ptolemies, the Hecatomnids, as this dynasty was called, were into the royal incest. Mausolus had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Both sisters married their brothers. One brother was left out. He did not get to participate in the incest.
Possibly for the best?
I don't know. I don't know what he would say about it. Maybe he's like, damn, I don't get to bone my sister. Why? I don't know. I'm not in the Hecatomnid dynasty.
Thankfully, none of us are. I mean, it feels very House of the Dragon, right? Like, it feels very weird, incestuous, and just bizarre.
They're attempting to Targaryen. Everyone back up. So both sisters married their brothers, but unlike the Ptolemies, this appeared to be the only generation of this family where this happened. And none of these unions produced children, including Mausolus's marriage with Artemisia, which suggests that their marriage was purely symbolic. A lot has been written about why these brother-sister marriages happened in the first place. One theory is that this was a relatively new dynasty, and these guys, these people married their siblings in order to set their family apart from others and make them seem more godlike, because there's a lot of incestuous unions in myths, right? There's a lot of gods that marry their siblings. And there is sort of a folkloric theory that when incestuous unions happen, usually this happens in royal families, and they do it to set themselves apart and make them seem closer to the gods. I can't say if that's true or not.
I mean, it's wild. Like, I kind of understand why there might be so much incest amongst the gods, because there are a limited number of gods. It doesn't explain it, because there are other pantheons, although usually they don't interact with other pantheons, so maybe that's it.
It's also about keeping the bloodline pure.
Yeah, but listen, they tried to Targaryen here, right? They were trying to Targaryen so hard, and yet they did not produce any children. Therefore, their weird incest lasted for 1 generation and was just a weird anomaly that's so gross. I'm not here for it.
I mean, are you saying that they just were not Targaryening hard enough?
I mean, I'm kind of glad they weren't. So the mausoleum is named after Mausolus, but it was arguably Artemisia who had sole hand in designing and building it. This isn't 100% known for sure, but, we think so, right?
We think so, but we don't know. I'll get into the precise dates of things later.
Exactly. She is also buried there. So why is this called the Mausoleum and not the Artemisium? I don't think Artemisium is correct. I think it would have a different ending in Latin. But anyway, why?
The patriarchy, I think. That's the quick answer.
Artemisia II comes from a long tradition of strong and savvy female rulers. Her namesake, Artemisia I of Caria, may be familiar to some of you, and that's because we covered her in Amazon's Warrior Queens and Generals, and we have probably just re-released that episode or will re-release it after this episode. Artemisia I lived roughly 130 years prior to Artemisia II, around the 480s BC. And her kingdom was much smaller then. She ruled over Halicarnassus, at that time a city-state, still under control of the Achaemenid Persians, as well as a handful of islands. It's not 100% clear whether the two Artemisias were directly related or not, or whether she was just named in honor of her, so just bear that in mind.
So Artemisia I fought on the side of Xerxes I, the king of Persia, during his second invasion of Greece, personally commanding a small fleet of 5 ships during the sea battles of Artemisium and Salamis. She was known for her high competence as a naval general, her wit, and her wise counsel. Xerxes famously listened to her advice in a room full of dudes who were trying to shout her down, and he sent her a full suit of armor in gratitude for her service. Her captain got a spindle and distaff. There were a lot of weird, underhanded, gender-based disses in this work relationship. We talk more about that in the episode on her, so if you're interested in that, go listen to that episode.
Anyway, Artemisia II inherited this badassery. She was like, I might not be directly related to you, Artemisia I, but I am taking in all the badassery that you have brought into the world, and I'm just going to bring it into my body and be this badass queen.
She might be related to her, she might not be. I don't know. It's a question.
It's a history's mysteries. Either they were directly related and she inherited it, or they weren't directly related and she inherited it. After Mausolus died, Artemisia took over rule by herself and her kingdom revolted. And it wasn't because of her policies. No. She just continued all the policies and platform positions her husband had. She made no sudden moves at all. They just really, really didn't want to be ruled by a woman. Shocker that this was called the Mausoleum now. And outside factions saw an opportunity. There was the assumption, perhaps, that Artemisia would be weak and an easy target for invasion. The island of Rhodes was, and is, an island about 62 miles south of Halicarnassus. And when Caria rose up in revolt, they leaped at the chance to take advantage of the chaos and lay their own claim on Caria.
They sent a fleet to Halicarnassus with the intent to take it over. What they didn't know is that there was a hidden harbor that Mausolus had built before he died. Artemisia hid her ships and soldiers in the secret harbor and let the Rhodians sweep into her main harbor completely unimpeded. She instructed the citizens of Halicarnassus to meet the Rhodians at the gates and let them in enthusiastically. The Rhodians, assuming the Halicarnassians were just as stoked as everyone else to be ruled over by guys again, woohoo! Saw nothing suspicious in this at all. But as soon as the Rhodians went into the city, Artemisia led her ships out of the secret harbor and into the main harbor. She captured the enemy ships and slaughtered the Rhodians in the city marketplaces to a man. She then put her own soldiers on the Rhodian ships, sailed those back to Rhodes, and they thought it was their own fleet returning triumphant, naturally welcomed them in, and then Artemisia II captured Rhodes too. Suckers.
I kind of love her, except for the brother marrying.
I mean, I guess they didn't bone, so it's fine.
Is it though?
It's just for show.
Yeah, you could have a different platform than marrying your family.
Could you, though?
Yes!
Look at what happened when her brother died.
True. You do have a point there.
Just trying to Targaryen. The most successful people Targaryening in the ancient world that I know of are the Ptolemies.
Oh, yeah. In the Western world, in the Mediterranean, yes. I mean, I haven't done a deep dive into other places of the world who also tried to Targaryen.
I'm sure other places in the world were doing it, but look, the Ptolemies were about as close to Targaryening perfectly as possible. All they needed were dragons. Could you imagine if the Ptolemies had dragons?
No, because it's fucking terrifying. Like, we would all be Ptolemies right now. We would all be married to our siblings.
We're not good enough to be married to our siblings, Jen. Our bloodlines aren't important enough to keep pure.
Well, that's true. But can you imagine after that many years of inbreeding what it would look like?
I can't even fathom.
Would they have created a new, species?
They've melded into the dragons. They become the dragon. That's eventually the Targaryen endgame, right? Look, if you fuck your sibling long enough.
We are not in any way supporting incest. So, let's talk about Polyaenus, he of the many anusi. Polyani. So, Polyaenus, he of the many ani, in his stratagems, tells another story of Artemisia's wiliness when she was trying to conquer the city of Latmus. Quote, Artemisia planted soldiers in ambush near Latmus, and herself, with a numerous train of women, eunuchs, and musicians, celebrated a sacrifice at the grove of the Mother of the Gods, which is about 7 stades distant from the city. When the inhabitants of Latmus came out to see the magnificent procession, the soldiers entered the city and took possession of it. Thus did Artemisia, by flutes and cymbals, possess herself of what she had in vain endeavored to obtain by force of arms.
I do feel like Artemisia II really leverages the idea that people underestimate her for being a woman to kick their ass.
And that's why I love her so much. I'm here for her and not so much the scammy brother husband.
I love them both so hard. She's the, really savvy, hard-headed naval general who might put on a dress and dance around in front of your city so that you come out and then she's going to kick your ass.
And her brother will take your hair.
He's going to take your money and your hair. He's going to scam you out of every cent you have.
And your hair.
And you're going to leave bald and broke.
God, that sounds like my life. Bald and broke. The Jen McMenemy story.
Jen does have lots of hair. I'm just going to say that.
Anyway, Artemisia II was a crafty naval general and military strategist who took absolutely no shit from anybody. None at all. And, as we said, historians have suspected that since she and Mausolus had no children, that their marriage was symbolic and that these two did not bone. And I support that. And we kind of suspected that this might be one of those, quote, woke for the time things you sometimes see in the ancient world, where it was a backdoor way to allow women in the royal family to have more of a role in ruling in a misogynistic world that would not tolerate a female ruler alone. And again, this sounds very Targaryen to me. The Targaryen women had a lot more agency. They rode dragons. Even Daenerys Targaryen conquered entire continents. Targaryen women, they were getting shit done.
I'm currently watching House of the Dragon with my dad, and I haven't gone all the way through it. I think I'm still on season 1. And as I recall, Rhaenyra, the main character Targaryen leading lady, in that timeline, she's the heir to the throne, but her claim is a little shaky and everyone's challenging her, and she feels that Matt Smith's character, Daemon, her uncle, because he's got such a fearsome reputation, would really make her enemies take a step back and leave her alone. She's the one who pursues marriage with him in that story. They do bone. Spoilers. But they could technically not bone, and she could still get the same effect, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, we saw this with the Julian Claudians, right? There was definitely a lot of sister, uncle, brother, cousin marrying. It was a circle. You had Agrippina the Younger, who married her uncle, but Claudius also married Messalina, who I think was distantly related to him or to Agrippina.
Well, yeah, everybody married their distant relatives and their cousins. That wasn't even considered incest then, right? But there was one uncle-niece marriage.
And there was Caligula with his sisters. There was the rumor of Agrippina and Nero.
Those are all kind of salacious rumors, right? Those were not official marriages, but we do have the uncle-niece marriage. And she pursued that marriage too, at least according to the ancient sources.
She did pursue that marriage, and she pursued that marriage because that was how she kept herself and her son safe. We talk about this all the time. Women's power a lot of times relies on the male that they attach themselves to in the ancient world, depending on the area of the world and the time period. And, women, particularly in the upper echelons of power, were ruthless in getting the right marriages and alliances to ensure their life and also the life of their children.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that they were necessarily just ruthless because they had a hunger for power. I don't think that wasn't the case, but I also see this as survival.
Yeah, and if I didn't make that clear, when I said ruthless, it is about their own lives and the lives of their children. It's not always about power, although power is an element. We can't discard that, but it is about surviving. It's about their life and their children's lives, because if you were at the bottom of that shark tank, you would be picked off pretty quickly. Or if you pick the wrong person,
or you get in somebody's way, or someone thinks you're a threat to their power, even if you're not doing anything to threaten them. Like, just your existence could be a threat to someone's power enough that they might want to scoot you off the mortal coil, shall we say. So, as we were talking about, some historians believe that it's possible that these brother-sister marriages, or maybe it's just me that believes it's possible, that these brother-sister marriages were there to give the women a backdoor way to legitimately rule alongside their brothers without the populace making it a whole thing, right? Like, if the woman is married to the man and technically subordinated to the man in that way, the population will tolerate her rule as well. And while most ancient records, which were largely Greek, talk about only Mausolus as a ruler, local epigraphs and other engravings in Caria talk about them both and represent them both as having a more equal role. Although they do rebel when Artemisia is in control by herself. So question marks on all of that. But anyway, so that's Artemisia II, a badass woman from a legacy of badass women who married her brother but definitely did not bone him, she did not, who shared in ruling her country and then ruled it herself, putting down hard any haters and naysayers, and she may have been child-free, possibly. But what's she remembered for? This is going to break your heart, Jen. I'm sorry. She's remembered for taking her grief over her brother's death to the extreme next level.
Yeah, because that was also a thing that was super famous in the world at this time. How women were supposed to personify and act out their grief. How they were the grieving woman for whoever had died in their life.
Like they were the grievers for the whole family and the whole community, right? Because men were not allowed to show their emotions or whatever.
It was very performative. If you were a woman who had a large family, you could spend most of your time essentially in performative grief at this time. And I will say that when I went to the Archaeological Museum in Athens, there's all of these incredible reliefs from the cemetery at Kerameikos, and so many of them are just women in grieving postures. We carry that sort of like the performative aspect of grief in women. We see it going on and on through the centuries into the Victorians, and it's gotten a little better in today's day and age, but in some places. But yeah, it's a role that women are supposed to really perform because, as Jenny said, men were not supposed to show their emotions or their grief or anything. So what we know about Artemisia comes from Greek sources, and then Renaissance painters and artists who latched onto this image of perfect feminine grief. This is how all dudes wanted to be mourned by women. Like the idea that women would just be so, grief-struck after their passing that they just spent all their time performing this grief for them. And that's not to say some women didn't love and miss their partners, but this is very much coming from dudes who had a lot of arranged marriages and a lot of thoughts, shall we say. Anyway, this kind of performative grief was, quote, a lasting example of chaste widowhood and the purest and rarest kind of love, in the words of Giovanni Boccaccio, an Italian poet and writer of the Italian Renaissance who lived in the 1300s. Anyway, Mausolus died roughly in 353 BC. We don't know how. What we do know, or at least what we're told, is that after his death, Artemisia promptly lost it. Her funeral for Mausolus was said to be epic. It included elaborate ceremonies and funeral games, and instead of being gladiatorial, these games were literary competitions. Accomplished Greek writers from all over flocked to Halicarnassus to participate. Many were students of Isocrates, a famous Greek rhetorician.
So I did some light digging and I couldn't find an obvious connection between Isocrates and the Hecatomnids or Halicarnassus. So this is a bit of a mystery what the connection is. I don't know. But anyway, the winners of various literary funeral competitions at Mausolus' funeral, because there were many, are recorded in inscriptions. Apparently, the prose competition was won by Theopompus of Chios, beating out Isocrates himself, although historians point out that this may have been a different Isocrates, as the original one would have been very elderly at this point.
And you see some of that again, if you go to Athens in the museum, you can see some of the engravings that say that this person won this competition.
Not necessarily this particular one.
It would have been competitions in Athens, but if you go to Athens, you can see in some of the grave markers will say that this person won this funerary competition. So this was a thing that they did, and I just find it so fascinating.
Yeah. So the Adectes of Phaselis completely dominated the verse competition with his entry, a tragic play called Mausolus.
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 Like that, exactly. So none of these winning entries or any others from this event have survived that I know of. So we don't know how they depict Mausolus.
Mausolus.
Or Artemisia or her grief. But it is not unreasonable, and some historians have suggested, that the plays, poetry, and prose here represented a major injection into the literary zeitgeist of the time of how great Mausolus was, and what an amazing wife Artemisia was, and how deeply, deeply she mourned her husband-brother by some of the greatest writers of the time. Maybe that's why Artemisia became so well known down through the centuries, primarily for how hard she mourned Mausolus.
Yeah, not for the conquering.
Not for the naval battles, nothing.
Because the main thing she became known for was literally ingesting her husband. She was said to have mixed some of his ashes into her wine and drunk it daily over a 2-year period, during which she gradually pined away and died due to her grief and love for Mausolus. I guess at some point in time she also found, just a smidgen of time to put down rebellions and take over roads. That was just like a side hustle.
That was when she wasn't busy drinking her husband-brother's ashes.
Yeah. Ugh. Renaissance painters and artists really latched onto this story. A number of paintings have been done of Artemisia drinking her brother-husband's ashes. None have been done of her commanding a war fleet, however. So, modern artists, please get on this.
Could somebody just make a painting of Artemisia not drinking her brother's ashes and doing literally anything else?
Could you have her pouring ashes into a wine glass, pouring it out while commanding, the naval fleet?
That qualifies as not drinking her brother's ashes, so that would be good enough for me.
Exactly. Anyway, the mausoleum was said to be a physical manifestation of Artemisia's enormous, elaborate, dramatic, and very outsized grief. And that's part of what made it so famous in its time. That was an integral part of its legend.
You walk into a candlelit room where a girl in a feathered mask greets you. Her identity is one of your city's best-kept secrets. No one is supposed to know a nightbird's true face. And that isn't why you came. You came for this girl's rare and highly illegal form of magic. She's about to gift it to you with a kiss. And you know it will be worth the price. Hi, ancient history fangirl listeners. I'm Kate Armstrong, and you might know me as the host over on The Exploress, a podcast where we time travel through history to find out what life was really like for women of the past. Welcome to the world of Nightbirds, my 1920s tinted fantasy novel, which you can buy now wherever good books are sold. I'm popping in to tell you that its sequel, Firebirds, hit shelves on August 27th. If you like female-focused stories with lots of historical inspiration, glittering settings, and intrigue, I think this one might just be for you. So, be careful who you kiss, and fly carefully.
So let's talk about what the mausoleum looked like. Oh my god, I said it right.
I've been waiting so long for a description.
After we got through who Mausolus was, who Artemisia was, now we're really invested in their tomb. It was, by all accounts, extremely impressive. Like Halicarnassus itself, it was multicultural and took inspiration from many different influences: Greece, India, Persia, Egypt, and local indigenous traditions from all over Caria. The tombs of Xanthos in Lycia were one particular inspiration. Remember, Lycia was a region Mausolus conquered when expanding his territory. These were pillar tombs, a tomb chamber underneath a large stone pillar. The Xanthos tombs had solid rectangular pillars, carved into the shapes of buildings, with columns, roofs, and friezes. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus did something like that, but on a very much grander scale.
So my question is, how could Mausolus be buried in his tomb if his sister drank all the ashes? I guess unless she's buried there and because she ingested his ashes, now they're both there? That's weird.
Actually, a really good question, and I don't have the answer to this question.
It should be the Temple of Artemisia who consumed her brother's ashes.
The Artemisium, right?
The Artemisium.
She buried Mausolus within herself, and then she buried herself in the mausoleum. Think about it.
But I don't think it would be I think is masculine in Latin. But anyway, it's fine. I can't remember. It's been too many years, but I don't think that's right. But it could be. So, ancient Greeks typically placed their tombs outside their city walls. But Mausolus, or possibly Artemisia, wanted this monument front and center, right in the middle of the city, on a hill where everyone could see it from all parts of Halicarnassus and from the harbor. It was a gleaming white marble edifice that absolutely dominated the landscape, festooned with art from the best sculptors of the time. It was, by all accounts, extremely memorable. Mausolus died in 353 BC. The mausoleum was completed in 350 BC. Some historians have suggested Artemisia herself was the only person solely responsible for the commissioning of the mausoleum after her brother's death. Others believe that Mausolus began construction on the building himself shortly before he died, and Artemisia was just continuing his work. It's not known for sure, although historians do believe it didn't take long to build, only about 3 years or so, which is really quick.
That, rapidity of building this monument kind of speaks to how much power the Hecatomnids held. And this next thing I'm going to say further reinforces that. Artemisia II died 2 years after her husband's death. But workers continued to work on it for another year to make sure that the monument was completed. And this is not that common. Pharaohs in Egypt, who were gods and kings in their time, needed to get their pyramids finished before their deaths, or they couldn't guarantee it would ever be finished at all. Bettany Hughes, in her book, suggests that the artists insisted on completing what had become for them an important masterwork on its own. And I've seen other historians say that as well. This monument itself became so important to the workers and the artists that they had to finish it. But I also think that speaks to the enduring power of these two people and the grip on their populace, that they had to finish this tomb even as somebody else came into power who might not have wanted to spend those resources on that. So we get our most complete description of the mausoleum, said it right, from Pliny the Elder, who is only one of 2 ancient sources who gives us the dimensions of the building. Historians today believe Pliny was working directly from a description written by the architect himself, Pythias, and that he possibly misinterpreted some things, so his description isn't considered completely accurate. However, it's the one that shapes most of the recreations we see today.
So, based on what Pliny tells us, the mausoleum was a rectangular building, 63 feet long on the north and south, slightly shorter to the east and west, 411 feet all around, and 148 feet total in height. It was designed by 2 renowned Greek architects, Pythias of Priene and Satyros. It's said that 4 famous and celebrated Greek sculptors were called into work on the edifice, and each one took a side.
Leochares, renowned for his portrait sculptures in ivory and gold, who also created sculptures at Olympia to celebrate Philip II of Macedon's victories before the statue of Zeus at Olympia.
Bryaxis, another Greek sculptor, whose work was favored by kings. He was known for creating a likeness of Seleucus, king of Syria, in bronze. He decorated the north side.
He's the only one that I know which side he worked on. I looked for this for the other ones and I didn't find it. Scopas, a renowned protege of the superstar sculptor Praxiteles, Pliny said his Venus was more stunning than Praxiteles' Cnidian Aphrodite, which is high praise. And if you want to know about the Cnidian Aphrodite, supposedly Praxiteles created that sculpture based on our girl Phryne's physique. And then it created the beauty standards for women up until the Renaissance and beyond. And if you're interested in that story, sign up to our Patreon because it's in there.
And Timotheus, a master of carving diaphanous draping linens that seemed to billow in the wind. He was known for his graceful goddesses at the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus. And when you say carving, like he's one of those sculptors who carved, I guess, out of marble or stone to make it actually look like their dresses were blowing in the wind. It's absolutely incredible.
There is some question about this list. Vitruvius, one of our main ancient sources about the mausoleum, says that Praxiteles was actually the 4th sculptor, not Timotheus. Some have said that Praxiteles was a 5th sculptor who may have been responsible for the statues on the roof. So this building was extremely extra. Built of gleaming white marble, although Michael Dennis Higgins, in his book, The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, talks about all the different kinds of marble there were, and there were white, but of different shades, I guess. Anyway, it had as many as 5 distinct layers. Some sources have said 6 or more distinct layers. Wrapped around the building at what could have been the first and third layers were 2 extremely elaborate, stunning friezes, masterworks on the level of the friezes that graced the Parthenon. One depicted a centauromachi, wars between men and centaurs. The other was a sweeping Amazonomachi that recounted the entire history of the Amazons.
So we mentioned that if not the Carian culture itself, the Hecatominids might have been women-centric and kind of woke for its time via that royal incest.
I'm not saying it's, feminist by modern standards.
And there are subtle clues on the mausoleum that may have been the case. Or maybe that Artemisia was making a point with some of these things that she had depicted.
That's quite possible. I think one of the big clues is that Amazons are a big theme on the mausoleum.
Yeah, but the problem with the Amazonomachi is that it is, in the end, sort of men dominating women. So while we see it a lot in different places, like I think it's on the Parthenon and it's also here, there is an agency that women have in declaring this war, but there's also a return to balance in the men trampling them. So it's not ideal. So for instance, there is a scene from Heracles' time as Queen Omphale's sex slave, and it's the scene where he takes an axe from the hands of Queen Hippolyta of the Amazons. And the axe in question was a Labrys axe, iconic to Minoan culture, which heavily hints at allowing more agency for women. And the Carians were believed to at least be partially descended from Minoan settlers.
I really feel like this is a mixed message here, because on the one hand, if you don't know our story, the story about Heracles and Omphale, we have a whole episode about it, but basically Heracles lives, kind of as Omphale's sub for a period of time, and he's very, very happy in that role. So that's kind of, I don't know if we call it overtly feminist, but that is a powerful woman story. But then you have Heracles taking this axe from Queen Hippolyta.
So I was going to agree with you. First off, we're showing a time period where essentially Heracles, the guy who got with all the women and some of the men and had children, progeny all across the Hellenic world and beyond, he's the sub to this very powerful, rich woman. And, all the stories that I have found say he had a good time just living with her. Yeah, this is a scene where a very powerful visiting queen gives him a Labrys axe. And the thing about the Labrys axe is it was used, obviously, we think, in Minoan life, but it was also very much used in rituals. And those rituals usually had a Minoan high priestess who usually would have used that axe in ceremony. So my question is Hippolyta in this moment, is she acknowledging Heracles' role as a woman, as someone who has been subjugated and put in that role?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when I was reading about this, the way it had been described was taking an axe from Queen Hippolyta, which I thought he was wresting it from her hands. But if she's granting him the axe, it's a really different message. It's important thing to note is that when Heracles was living with Omphale, he was wearing women's clothes, and I don't know if he was 100% living as a woman, but I think he was living as a woman when he was with her, and she was living as a man and, wearing his trappings that he normally wore, like his Nemean lion skin and stuff. So potentially was she acknowledging him as a woman in that sense and being accepted in a ritual space that was normally only for women?
So I'll say the reason I think that might be the case, and again, I haven't done all the research, but what I know of those stories is Heracles' punishment was to be a servant to Omphale for I think it was a year or something. And she chose while he was in service to her to have him dress and perform all the roles of a woman. At this point in time, the most powerful, strongest son of Zeus has been subjugated and given a woman's role. There are a few acts that he performs as Heracles in a more masculine role that's after his year of servitude is over. We know that Heracles was living as a woman because there are quite a few myths that, and particularly one involving Pan, that almost goes very wrong for Heracles, instead goes very wrong for Pan when he's dressed as a woman. I would almost say, and I can't see it to tell you whether he's wresting it from her or she's granting it to him, I would almost say, it's quite fascinating to me if she is granting it to him. What is she saying about his role and how he's accepted? Is he accepted also as this sort of person who can be both? I don't know.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting in terms of the gender identity of Heracles. So interestingly, this is a side question, but did you know that the stele that depicted two women fighting as gladiators, I know we talked about this in our gladiatorial series somewhere, one was named Achillea and the other Amazon, so that stele was also found in Halicarnassus.
I did know that.
I didn't realize it. I mean, I'm sure I saw it. I'm sure we talked about it in those episodes, but I forgot. But it was not on the mausoleum. It was elsewhere. But it was also in Halicarnassus. So maybe they also had women fighting as gladiators. So here's another fun detail about, this is specifically about the mausoleum. Bethany Hughes tells us in her book, 7 Wonders of the Ancient World, I haven't seen this anywhere else, but I'm sure she's getting it from research, that priestesses in the friezes wore dresses so diaphanous and see-through, although, in the marble, that their vulvas were clearly visible through the cloth, which I just love. I'm just like, you know what? When I die, bury me under a giant pillar of vulvas.
Should those vulvas be attached to people or just vulvas? Just loose vulvas?
I mean, you know what? Use your artistic license.
All right, we better start a GoFundMe for that because it's going to take a long time to get the money we need for that.
Every Targaryen has to start planning their tomb early. So on top of these layers of vulva-centric friezes was a colonnade ringed in 36 columns, and standing between each column was a life-sized marble statue, giving the impression of a gathered throng among the columns. And I've seen recreations of this. It looks like there's like this crowd. The columns themselves were a new kind of Ionic column, designed specifically for the mausoleum, with 2 curls on the ends and a center with a bow-like curve. There were said to be more than 400 freestanding statues, by the way, on this building, of animals, people, and deities arranged on perhaps 5 or 6 different levels. 400 statues.
It's so many statues. So on the roof stalked a large number of hyper-realistic marble lions, tigers, panthers, and sphinxes. Above all these animals, tapering to the top, rose a step pyramid of 24 steps, culminating in a platform topped with a massive bronze 4-horse chariot pulled by 4 enormous marble horses and driven by Mausolus and Artemisia themselves, worked in marble and heroic proportions. Talk about making yourself a god.
Wow. Good Lord.
So we've seen several descriptions that depict the mausoleum as a blindingly white building. Bright white marble, white statues, white pyramid.
White. It was very white.
White. And that was, allegedly, part of its greatness. And it's true that the marble the building was made from would have been white. But it also would have been painted. In 1856, when the mausoleum was first unearthed, there was still paint to be seen on the sculptures, the friezes and decorative marble blocks that remained. Unfortunately, much of it flaked away through contact with the air or scraped off as the blocks were transported. Or if they were gilded, scraped off for the gold.
Possibly. However, traces we have now show that there were yellow, red, and blue colors on the friezes and sculptures, and that the backgrounds of the friezes were painted blue. Some of the statues were covered with thin sheets of gold and lead, including the horses on the roof. Historians now believe that the friezes and potentially the statues, if not much of the building, may have been riotously colorful. So, it was not necessarily a white building, as many have described it. So, what about the inside? Don't you want to know what's in there?
Tell me what's in there. Nothing.
Nothing. The mausoleum did not really have much of an interior. According to Michael Dennis Higgins in his book, 7 Wonders of the Ancient World, the building was solid. It was a solid block, like most ancient Egyptian pyramids, or, specifically, the pillar tombs at Xanthos. It was built with a core of green volcanic tuff, a rock unique and local to the area, with the outside sheathed in marble. There was a single small burial chamber built beneath it. It's like a pyramid, right? Like, the Great Pyramid of Giza itself has chambers inside the pyramid body, but most of the pyramids, the ancient Egyptian pyramids, were solid, and there was just a tomb built beneath the pyramid. And that's true of a lot of the ancient mastabas, like the Egyptian mastabas as well. It's also true of the Xanthos pillar tombs.
Yeah, there was a set of monumental stairs leading to the burial chamber. The stairs had been deliberately buried, probably at the culmination of that great funeral. Whose funeral? We don't know.
Maybe Artemisia's funeral.
Yeah, because she ate him.
She ate him, and then she would have had to be buried after him, right?
Yeah, because she ate him. I can't get over the idea of putting that into your wine. Like,
Question, did she really do it, or was this just sort of a literary thing? I don't know.
I don't know. She married her brother, but she also dominated as a naval woman, so who knows?
And she did not bone him. We don't know anything, really.
So, when unearthing these stairs, archaeologists found the remains of animal sacrifices: 5 oxen, 8 lambs, a flock of sheep, and birds, as well as hen's eggs, laid on slices of meat. They had been placed on the stairs, and then the whole thing was buried together, probably at the culmination of a great ceremony. For who? The entrance to the burial chamber itself was blocked by a large block of green tuff. I love that it's green and volcanic. That's for me. Behind that, there was an outer pair of doors made of green andesite and an inner pair of white marble. It would seem that tomb robbers tunneled around the tuff to get into the interior chamber. The room itself was said to be lined with carved, colorful marble, although Bethany Hughes, in her book, The 7 Wonders of the Ancient World, thinks it was more likely to have been painted stucco. It's believed that Mausolus's ashes were placed in the inner sanctum and Artemisia's in an antechamber just outside. But this tomb has been thoroughly plundered, all of its treasures stolen, probably shortly after the burial. So we don't actually know for sure.
Let's emerge once again from this tomb and take a look around the courtyard, because yes, there was a courtyard, an enormous courtyard. The building was said to sit on a giant unpaved courtyard that measured 793 by 344 feet, as big as 5 football fields. The courtyard was walled on all sides with glorious walls made of pink porphyry, very, very expensive stone, more expensive than marble, with an entrance to the east. We don't know what the deal was with this courtyard. Why did they need one so big? Was it there to host religious ceremonies? Did it hold huge crowds as spectators for those prose and poetry and play competitions about how sad Artemisia was?
So sad.
So sad. Bethany Hughes suggests there was an elaborate Persian-style garden here, complete with gazelle and wild deer, in the tradition of a Persian paradise garden. We don't know for sure. I would love it if that was the case, though.
There is a fountain here at the mausoleum, and it's built into the eastern wall, bubbling up from an aqueduct that predated the mausoleum. Some have speculated it was a sacred fountain, and the reason this location was chosen. The fountain also has a very significant mythic history. Bethany Hughes mentioned a spring in this courtyard, which according to local lore was the very same spring where Aphrodite's son with Hermes, Hermaphroditos, encountered the nymph Salamis and blended with her when she tried to sexually assault him, because women are monsters too in the ancient world. And this is the story of how Hermaphroditos became intersex. It was also said that long after Mausolus died, locals believed this spring would turn men effeminate or infertile, which is a whole nother connotation that they're making about Mausolus and this spring and everything else based on their toxic masculinity.
I can't say why or where that myth came from, or if the Greeks put this myth about Hermaphroditos over that, or if there was something else going on under it. Like, I really don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, the infertility, like, is that a dig that they had no children? The effeminate, I'm wondering if that's some cultural stereotype against Mausolus because he was so closely tied with the Persians, and how the ancient Greeks might have viewed the Persians based on their own cultural prejudice at the time. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to unpack there, or it might have nothing to do with that and might have to do with some indigenous beliefs that we just don't know about. So that's the description of the mausoleum. But there is one more detail that I want to share with you guys. So when this monument was first excavated in the 1800s, historians found at the foot of the western staircase a beautiful alabaster jar inscribed with the signature of Xerxes I. So the inscription, Xerxes the Great King, appears in 4 languages on this jar: Egyptian, Elamite, Babylonian, and Old Persian. This is the Jar of Xerxes, an incredibly precious artifact, probably from Egypt originally. They did a lot of alabaster, like a lot of work in alabaster. Historians speculate that this may have been a gift given by Xerxes I to Artemisia I for her incredible naval leadership and kept as a treasured keepsake all the way down to the time of Artemisia II.
Was Artemisia II actually related to Artemisia I? Maybe.
I cannot say. I don't know. We don't know if that's even the case, that it was given from, Xerxes to Artemisia or someone else. But there's some really great fan fiction you could write around that.
So, Mausolus and Artemisia had 3 other siblings, 2 brothers, Idrius and Pixodarus, and a sister, Ada. Ada and Idrius married each other, and Pixodarus was left out of this weird incest party. He was like the black sheep of the Targaryens.
Yeah, he didn't get to marry any of his siblings. God.
Oh, I'm sure he was so bummed.
I can't say that they were all forced to do incest. That's not included in the sources.
So, after Artemisia died, Ada and Idrius took over. They ruled together for several more years. During their rule, Caria stayed relevant within the larger Hellenic world. The sibling rulers donated to the Temple of Delphi and other important ritual sites. But a few years into their joint reign, Idrius died. And the dates are fuzzy. We've seen sources say that they ruled together for 2 or 4 or even 7 years before Idrius died. Anyway, at some point, Idrius died, and Ada ruled alone for another, let's say, 4 years or so. Again, the dates are fuzzy. In 340 BC, Ada was overthrown by her youngest brother, the one who did not get to marry any of his sisters, Pixodarus. Pixodarus expelled his sister from Halicarnassus. 5 years later, in 335 BC, he died, and the Persian overlords appointed his son-in-law, Orontabates, as ruler. Apparently, he and Ada really didn't get along because she felt it prudent to flee to the fortress of Alinda, an ancient city in Caria as old as the 2000s BC. Potentially, the city had Hittite roots.
Anyway, apparently Ada ruled locally in exile until a year later when Alexander the Great rocked up. The ruler he approached first was not Orontabates in Halicarnassus, but Ada at Alinda. Ada immediately welcomed Alexander and promptly adopted him as her own son and heir, and he fought a siege at Halicarnassus against the Achaemenid Persians. It was a bloody battle in which the Persians used catapults and decimated Alexander's troops. But this was Alexander the Great, and he turned the tide at some point. I am not getting into the specifics of this battle. Anyway, when it became clear they were losing, the Persians set fire to the city in their retreat. Most of it burned to the ground. Alexander appointed Ada to rule over the smoking ashes.
Hot.
Literally. It's sad the city never recovered from that siege.
I can't imagine why not.
I mean, it was like firebombed. After Alexander died, it passed through the hands of many of his successor generals. They basically fought over it like dogs fighting over a carcass during the wars of the Diadochi. Antigonus I, the one-eyed, Lysimachus, and finally the Ptolemies from 281 to 197. The Ptolemies got their hands on this place. Good lord.
Yeah, it was strategically important.
Listen, the Ptolemies were Targaryening the hardest. They could have taught the Hecatonids a thing or two.
Many things or two.
So many things about incest. They had PhDs in incest.
69 things? Too far?
Little too far, Jen. Anyway, so there was a brief period where it was independent, 68 whole years, before the Romans took over in 129 BC. The city was beset the whole time by constant war, and when it wasn't at war, pirates ravaged the city.
Roughly 272 years later, after Alexander's siege, give or take a few years, decade, who knows, Cicero wrote that the city was still a deserted wreck, almost completely empty. Its populace long since gone. You could just imagine the mausoleum rising, gleaming white out of the ruins, its deer long since fled, its garden overgrown, weeds hiding the lower friezes, the higher parts rising up over the ruins of, in my imagination, a still smoking city. Still, this mausoleum would have been visible everywhere. So, throughout everything, the mausoleum continued to stand. Eventually, the Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire, and the area became Christian-controlled. In the 500s AD, an anonymous cleric known as Pseudo-Nonnus mentioned the monument, saying it was still quite intimidating.
At one point, the city of Halicarnassus was renamed Bodrum. The area was taken over by the Seljuk Turks in the 1000s AD, a Muslim empire whose invasion, as Brittany Hughes tells us, was one of the instigators of the First Crusades. 100 years after their invasion, a monk named Eustathius of Thessalonica mentioned it and said it, quote, was and is a wonder. In the 1300s, the mausoleum was featured in the artwork of Florentine painter Boccaccio, so deeply inspired by Artemisia's performative grief. Many Western painters in the later medieval and into the Renaissance era turned their hand at depicting the mausoleum. However, we have a clue that it had been seriously damaged by this point, because nobody really seemed to know what it looked like. Brittany Hughes tells us that it was shown, quote, in guises ranging from obelisk-thin, pagoda-like, to something a little resembling Noah's Ark. Rather than a gaudy assertion of the possibilities of the continuation of life, the mausoleum was increasingly imagined as an incarnation of decay.
As with the fabled Pharos of Alexandria, the mausoleum was brought to its knees by earthquakes. And potentially, finally, Olympian Zeus. It was fire, but also earthquakes. Michael Dennis Higgins, in his book, The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, tells us that the bedrock under the mausoleum was not as stable as it should be. Several minor fault lines run directly through the site, and some of the bedrock was made up of clay and sandstone, which could not hold up the structure's estimated weight of 80,000 tons. Whew! That clay and sandstone was apparently honeycombed with passages and chambers dug into it prior to the mausoleum, suggesting its location had long been an important site. It's fascinating. He also mentions that during the winter, the water table rises close to the surface and probably threatened to flood the burial chamber. The builders knew about this and built a drainage tunnel to help with the flooding. But over the centuries, the tunnel became blocked with silt, as the underground aqueduct did. At some point, the water rose, flooding the burial chamber, saturating the weak clay and sandstone bedrock, and further weakening the building's foundations.
Eustathius of Thessalonica wrote in the late 1100s AD that the mausoleum still, quote, was and is a wonder, as we've said. Higgins speculates that at this time, the mausoleum was probably still in relatively good repair. However, just about 300 years later, in 1404 AD, the Knights of St. John, a division of the Knights Hospitaller? You're Catholic, don't you know how to say this?
Hospitallers.
Hospitallers, a Catholic paramilitary group strongly associated with the Crusades, found it a ruin. The roof and parts of the famous 36-pillar colonnade with its special ionic pillars had collapsed. The north section was almost completely in ruins and had been buried under sediments washed down from the hills above. We don't know exactly when this happened, but Higgins believed that an earthquake in 1303 was probably the culprit. This is the exact same earthquake originating in Crete that heavily damaged the Pharos, sent a tsunami to inundate Alexandria, and potentially loosened and destroyed many of the limestone casing stones on the face of the Great Pyramid.
Caria is about 361 miles away from Crete, so Higgins believes that the earthquake, as formidable as it was, probably wasn't that strong in Caria. He suggests that to have such a damaging effect on the mausoleum, it must have already been seriously compromised. A second earthquake in 1493 probably caused even more extensive damage. The Knights of St. John, meanwhile, had taken up residence in Bodrum, formerly Halicarnassus, around 1404 AD. They built a castle, now known as Bodrum Castle, and also the Castle of St. Peter on an isthmus in the harbor, where it still stands today. The castle has 4 towers, named the Italian, French, English, and German towers, after the 4 nationalities that came together to build it. It's possible the Knights of St. John were even more damaging to the mausoleum than the earthquake, because they systematically mined and plundered the ruins over the next 100 years, both to build this castle and then to repair it after the earthquake in 1493.
Today, if you visit Bodrum Castle, you can still see the large green blocks of volcanic tuff from the mausoleum's core and pink porphyry from its courtyard worked into the castle walls. And you could just imagine the people from the ancient world wringing their hands at this extremely expensive porphyry just built into this wall. That's expensive. But the knights also plundered the treasures. Lions, tigers, panthers, and sphinxes from the roof, all of that once stalked its window ledges. The entire Amazonomachy, reportedly, was strung out along the castle's walls at one point. They even included some of the famed mausoleum statues. There were 400 at one point. But much of the marble, including some of the statues and other artwork, was rendered down to make lime for mortar.
You can still see the mausoleum today. Its ruins still exist, although they are greatly depleted. You can see some fallen fragments of columns and crumbled blocks. You can still find that spring. In theory.
I think you can still find the spring. Bettany Hughes infers that you can find the spring still. I'm not 100% sure where it is or if that is true.
Yeah. But if you want to see the last remaining treasures of the mausoleum, you have to go to London. You have to go to the British Museum. Oh, that building of colonialism. Because it is the final resting place of much of the surviving artworks from the mausoleum. And I've said many times I've seen these. They're gorgeous. In the 1800s, gentlemen scholars shipped a number of treasures plundered and preserved by the Knights of St. John out of Bodrum Castle. Lions and tigers, surviving parts of friezes, the statues of Mausolus and Artemisia that once stood on the roof, along with those powerful chariot horses. Oh my God, I've seen those horses.
I've seen those horses.
Yeah, I remember them now, exactly.
In all, over 1,700 artifacts from the mausoleum are preserved in the British Museum, from fragments of stones and columns to the towering statues of Artemisia and Mausolus themselves. 2 of the more complete lion statues now decorate one of the British Museum's main staircases. So if you go to the British Museum, look for those lions. They're on either side of one of the staircases, and I couldn't figure out if it was like the outside staircase or the inside staircases, but look for lions. Meanwhile, the name Mausolus has been preserved in the language, in the name we call any fancy above-ground tomb, and the name Artemisia has passed on into dust like her bones. So that is the legacy of Mausolus. Once a king in his kingdom, a shark in his kind of small shark tank, his memory is eclipsed by that of his tomb. And this seems to have happened fairly quickly. In fact, the satirist Lucian, writing sometime between 125 and 180 AD, again dates are fuzzy, just a few hundred years after Mausolus' death, cuts right to the heart of it, as so many satirists do.
In his Dialogues of the Dead, the shade of Mausolus converses with the ghost of Diogenes of Sinope, a Greek philosopher who died in 323 BC, just 27 years after Mausolus. And Diogenes is a perfect foil for Mausolus. He was a Greek philosopher who was known for some fairly eccentric behavior. He was very concerned with the corruption of society, and he made that point by living in a jar at the Athenian Agora. He just lived in a jar. Diogenes felt that actions spoke louder than words, so he basically made his life a form of protest performance art against society's corrupting influences. The Agora in Athens was where all the more normie philosophers hung out, philosophers he didn't agree with, and Diogenes was known for popping out of his jar to heckle them, especially that cad, Plato. He hated Plato. I mean, Jenny, you have painted a picture of the Oscar the Grouch of philosophers, and I am here for it.
He was living in a jar at people. It just cracks me up. And I love that it's Diogenes of Sinope who's talking to Mausolus, because that's so perfect. So Diogenes was also known for carrying a lamp around during the day, saying he was looking for, quote, a man.
Aren't we all Diogenes?
It's really funny, like just a man. In English, the translation is often an honest man, the implication being it was impossible to find an honest man around here. And the original Greek just says a man. And I think what they're implying is that there were no real men in ancient Greek society, I guess, question mark. I think the implication is like different between the translations. So anyway, Diogenes hated Plato, as we discussed, and regularly showed up at his lectures with lunch and chewed extremely loudly with his mouth open to sabotage them. He was said to have publicly mocked Alexander the Great to his face, and he would. And Diogenes lived in poverty to make a point, deliberately dressing in rags, not bathing, sleeping outside in the heat and cold, all as a social commentary on the corruption of society. Diogenes strongly objected to basic social niceties like not doing all your bodily functions in public.
At people? Like, it's not just in public, it's the at people.
And he regularly pissed, shit, spit, ate, and masturbated in public. He wasn't just living in poverty at people, he was a public menace.
He was making it everyone else's problem. Ugh, fucking Diogenes.
Anyway, Lucian's Dialogues of the Dead pairs Diogenes, this extremely salty and inappropriate Oscar the Grouch philosopher.
Helios is a big fan of Diogenes. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Helios was watching Diogenes masturbate, but so was everybody else. I mean...
But Helios was like, I am here for this. Keep going, Diogenes. You're my favorite reality TV show. From the masturbation and the living at people, he was there for it.
Oh, for sure. So, Lucian's Dialogues of the Dead pairs Diogenes, this extremely salty and inappropriate Oscar the Grouch philosopher, with a very extra, very imperious, fancily tuned Mausolus. I just love the idea of these two in a room together. It cracks me up. Here's what they had to say to each other. And I found this translation on theoi.com by H.W. and F.G. Fowler. Jen, do you want to be Diogenes or Mausolus?
I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be Mausolus and let you be the salty masturbator.
I mean, okay. It's not that far out of character. All right, so I will be Diogenes and you will be Mausolus, Jen. All right, I'm gonna start us off by not masturbating in public, which is a real change for me.
Thank fuck.
Why so proud, Carian? How are you better than the rest of us?
Sinopian, to begin with, I was king of all Caria, ruler of many Lydians, subduer of islands, conqueror of well nigh the whole of Ionia, even to the borders of Miletus. Further, I was comely and of noble stature.
Hot.
Exactly. I was hot and a mighty warrior. Finally, a vast tomb lies over me in Halicarnassus, of such dimensions, of such exquisite beauty, as no other shade can boast. Thereon are the perfect semblances of man and horse, carved in the fairest marble. Scarcely may a temple be found to match it. These are the grounds of my pride. Are they inadequate?
Kingship, beauty, heavy tomb. Is that it?
It is, as you say. Also, I was never caught publicly masturbating, so win for me.
Okay, that's not in there, but it would be funny if it was.
Right? Lucian, you missed a real trick.
Oh, no, let's be clear. They didn't catch me masturbating. I was doing it publicly at people.
I've never publicly masturbated at people. The shame, the horror.
Don't knock it till you've tried it.
Why give it away for free?
Are you suggesting people will pay for it? The corruption.
Have you heard of OnlyFans?
Okay, now we're really getting off the rails. None of this was in the original.
If they can't figure out that wasn't in the original, I don't know what to tell them. No one predicted OnlyFans, guys.
So anyway, Mausolus says, "It is as you say," and then he stops talking. And then Diogenes does not talk about masturbation. In fact, nobody talks about masturbation in this dialogue at all.
But wouldn't it have been better if they did? Lucian was a satirist. How did he miss this?
You're not wrong, John. Anyway, maybe he was trying to meet some kind of PC, like 13 and up regulatory thing. I have no idea.
Like in the ancient world? Does that exist?
They were like marrying people off at 13. No. Diogenes responds, "But my handsome Mausolus, the power and the beauty are no longer there. If we were to appoint an umpire now, On the question of comeliness, I see no reason why he should prefer your skull to mine.
'Cause it's hotter.
Oh, shut up. Both are bald and bare of flesh. Our teeth are equally in evidence.
I took care of them. You did not.
How do you know? Maybe I had impeccable oral hygiene.
I doubt it. I've heard tales of how you lived at people. The stuff in your teeth, the shame.
Okay, none of this is in the original source. The shade of Mausolus is coming back to haunt us and inject things that were not in the original. Anyway, so Diogenes is talking about how, in fact, Mausolus, you're not hot anymore. Each of us has lost his eyes, and each is snub-nosed. Then, as to the tomb and the costly marbles, I dare say such a fine erection.
Oh, I have been told it is very fine. And stop disparaging snub noses.
You want to see my erection? Because I whip it out at the slightest provocation in public in the Agora.
See, I didn't have to because mine was so great they built a monument to it.
I hear your sister never boned you anyway.
Of course not. She's my sister.
She did drink your ashes, though.
I gave her power. She drank my ashes and made me immortal. It's fine. You don't know anything, Diogenes.
You're just a corrupt scam boy who's scamming people out of their hair.
And making money in the process. I didn't have to live in a jar.
Money is corrupt, just like society.
Popping out like Oscar the Grouch to masturbate and throw poop at people is also weird and corrupt.
I was trying to make a point.
And that point is what? You're no better than an animal?
Perhaps the animals are less corrupt than the humans. Think about it.
I would like to know what happened in your philosophy school.
A lot of me masturbating and eating in public. That's what happened. Anyway, I was talking about erections. I dare say such a fine erection gives the Halicarnassians something to brag about. I bet they did, too. And show off to strangers.
Sexy, sexy marvel. So many vulvas.
But I don't see, friend, that you were the better for it. Unless it is that you claim to carry more weight than the rest of us with all that marble on the top of you.
How many erections and vulvas do you have around you at any given time? Very few, Mr. Jar. If they turn that jar over, you get nothing.
So many vulvas and such a fine erection.
That's not what I was told. I was told you were thrown out of your jar.
I'm not saying nobody enjoyed my shows.
No, when you were gone, they burned that fucker.
Nobody wanted my jar, so nobody made the effort to throw me out of it.
It was pretty awful. It was like a hazmat. Oh.
They would have had to burn the whole Agora. Basically the whole city.
Are you responsible for one of the plagues of Athens? I think so.
There's so much of this that was not actually in this.
Clearly. Okay, this is what was actually written. This is what Mausolus actually said. Then all is to go for nothing. Mausolus and Diogenes are to rank as equals? And that is definitely a question mark, because Mausolus does not believe they are equals in any way, shape, or form.
I feel like Mausolus is coming back to tell you things, Jen.
I might be able to commune with him. Oh, he's such a good scammer. Like, maybe I should really allow him back into my life.
Maybe I should be like, Mausolus, tell me all your scammy secrets. I want to make money. Anyway, so Diogenes says, equals? My dear sir, no, I don't say that. While Mausolus is groaning over the memories of earth and the felicity which he supposed to be his, Diogenes will be chuckling. Ha ha ha. Like that.
Oh, that sounds like a weird guy who masturbates at you.
I'm chuckling while I masturbate. While Mausolus boasts of the tomb raised to him by Artemisia, his wife and sister.
Yeah, we were Targaryen. We were Targaryen-ing hard. I mean, come on.
I can't even pronounce it, so how did you know you were doing it?
Well, I've learned. I mean, the afterlife is vast. The afterlife is vast, and I'm able to watch TV. Sometimes I hang out with Julius Caesar.
Oh, God, I don't even want to with the two of you.
Oh, we have so many scams. So many scams.
So many scams. I bet Julius Caesar would love to scam some people out of their hair.
Yes.
Don't tell him I said that. I'll never hear the end of it. Good Lord. Anyway, so Diogenes goes on to say, while Mausolus boasts of the tomb raised to him by Artemisia, his wife and sister, whom he did not bone, Diogenes...
Yeah, we were Targaryening. Stop throwing shade.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Targaryens absolutely boned their sisters. You weren't Targaryening hard enough, my friend. You should have Targaryened harder. You would have become a dragon, but no.
I mean, listen, maybe Mausolus' sexuality was not into the ladies, and
Or at least the ones directly related to him.
yeah, which is fair. And he needed a wife, and they both had power, and he lived a good life. Let's stop throwing so much shade. But maybe he was awful.
Anyway, Diogenes wants to continue speaking about himself in the third person while he masturbates.
At you.
At you. Imagine him saying this while ferociously jerking off in your general direction.
I'm so sorry. I really hope you're not listening with children.
Nobody should be listening to us with children. Anyway, Diogenes knows not whether he has a tomb or no, the question never having occurred to him. He knows only that his name is on the tongues of the wise. I bet it is. As one who lived the life of a man. A higher monument than yours, vile carrion slave, and set on firmer foundations. Apparently he heard about all those earthquakes and, the sandy foundations and whatnot.
Methinks Diogenes doth protest too much. Also, I feel a little bit of xenophobia coming at me from Diogenes. I'm just going to say it.
Well, he is Greek, so.
Exactly. I'm just going to throw that out there. There is some xenophobia coming at me, Mausolus, from Diogenes.
With all that semen?
Yes. Methinks Diogenes must get his jar in order. I would say house, but you live in a jar filled with poop and food and semen.
So that's it for this week. Join us next week for whatever jar we're masturbating in next.
I'm not masturbating in a jar.
Neither am I.
Certainly not in the Agora.
No.
So let's try this again. So that's it for this week.
What are we doing? This is devolved.
It's truly, truly devolved into a weird and wonderful episode.
This is horrible and disgusting. And this jar is very unsanitary.
Yeah, I really hope nobody ever finds that jar. But moving on. In the meantime, you can join us on all the social media platforms. We're on Instagram, X, Threads, TikTok, and Facebook. We're only really active on Instagram, but we have profiles on the other ones. I mean, I post stuff to our Facebook and our X, and sometimes our Threads. You can find us at Ancient History Fangirl and check out our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl, to get extra episodes, to hear about something that we talked about earlier in this episode that I've now forgotten.
That's a real great selling point.
You can see videos of us and so much more.
I am going to say that I am really interested in doing a whole Patreon episode on Diogenes because I have just got to know more. There's a lot more to know. I'm just going to make masturbation jokes the whole time.
Which is a great way to show you Jenny's humor.
It's the lowest form of wit, as Julius Caesar keeps reminding me. Anyway, so you can check out our Patreon, which we've done a great job of selling at patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl. And we have some patrons to thank.
We do. Thank you all so much for supporting us.
Pause while I apologize for mispronouncing your name, which I hopefully don't, but if we do, we apologize.
And we thank you all so much for supporting us. Again, we say it every time, but this podcast really would not be possible without our patrons. You are the reason we can still keep this going after 5 years, and we hope to be able to keep going for another 5 or 10 years. But we can only do that with your support.
So thank you so much to our patrons, Anne Soulard,
Megan Newton,
Hannah Jean,
Alex Van Nievelt,
Bonnie Hildebrand,
NJ Baker,
and Jordan Marie. Thank you so much for your support. We could not do this podcast without you. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next week with whatever utter madness we are covering next.
Bye.